Internet, and welcome to the Collective Arcana. We're a channel all about tabletop gaming, and today we're going to continue our series on the Pathfinder Second Edition classes with the Sorcerer. Hey, folks! Before we continue with the our full breakdown of the Sorcerer here, definitely go ahead and give us a like, a subscribe. We really appreciate that here on the channel. It helps motivate us to keep going, and lets us know what you like to see and what you want more of. And definitely use those comments as well to ask us any questions or anything like that you have. We're more than happy to answer them, and we really appreciate your support of the channel. The Sorcerer is a spontaneous caster that gets to choose its tradition on character creation, so it has quite a bit of extra interest and versatility than some other casters. So let's go ahead and jump on in to stats and progression. Sorcerer gets 6 hit points plus Constitution modifier every single level, and its key ability score is Charisma. Sorcerer begins trained in Perception, and that will advance to Expert at 11 and stop there, which is a bit scary. For saves, it begins trained in Fortitude. That progresses to Expert at level 5. It begins trained in Reflex. That progresses to Expert at 9. And it begins trained in, or Expert in Will, which progresses to Master at 17. So the Sorcerer does have quite a few problems with saving throws. May notice that the Sorcerer does not get any legendary perception or saving throws. So that may be alarming to you, but Sorcerer's got a lot of oomph and a lot of power going for it. For skills, the Sorcerer begins trained in 1 based on its Bloodline, and we'll talk about Bloodlines in a moment, as well as 2 plus Intelligence modifier additional skills. That's not a whole lot of skills, but Sorcerers tend to, with the high Charisma, they still get a lot out of the few skill points they have, assuming they go towards Charisma-based ability or skills. For attacks, the Sorcerer is trained in simple and unarmed attacks, and that is going to progress to Expert at 11, and they will gain Weapon Specialization at level 13. Definitely not going to be making a whole lot of weapon strikes in 2nd edition. For defenses, the Sorcerer begins trained in Unarmored Defense, and that will progress to Expert at level 13. Sorcerers are, of course, trained in spellcasting attacks and DCs, and their tradition, their spellcasting tradition, varies by Bloodline, so that's going to be determined once we get to that Bloodline section and talk about that. That will progress to Expert at level 7, Master at 15, and Legendary at 19, which is the standard progression for full spellcasters in Pathfinder Second Edition. As spontaneous spellcasters, they do have some rules that are specific to them versus prepared spellcasters. We recommend you check out our Spellcasting Basics crash course video that we did a while back, just so you can get an idea for what those differences are, so that you're best educated on which type of spellcaster you want to be. You may find that spontaneous spellcasters like sorcerers don't fit what you want, or vice versa, that you love the idea of being spontaneous. Sorcerers will pick up their signature spells beginning at 3rd level, which we do talk about in that video, but suffice to say that while your spell list is limited, your signature spells will allow you to get the full heightening benefits from a select number of spells. So, Bloodlines. Let's talk Bloodlines. Bloodlines are the source of your magical power as a sorcerer, whether it's something in your immediate history or something that goes way back into your lineage. At some point in your ancestry, someone was either turned into or got it on with, or was in some way giving you bloodline from a type of creature beyond what your ancestry says. This can be, as I said, way back. It can be much more recent. It can be not just a simple, romantic liaison. It could be some sort of magical ritual or anything like that that put that effect onto your ancestry. Your bloodline determines your spellcasting tradition. As I said, it's also going to give you some skills that you're trained with in addition to the skill required for your spellcasting. So that is, religion for divine, occultism for occult spells, arcane for arcane spells, or arcana for arcane spells, and primal or nature for primal spells. You'll also, as I said, get an additional skill that you're trained with. It's also going to grant you some additional spells over what normally come with your tradition, and those are going to be automatically added to your spell repertoire, your list of spells that you have access to from your tradition. You will also receive 1 focus point and your first Bloodline spell, which is just the term that sorcerers use for their focus spells. And it's also going to give you access to an ability called Blood Magic, and that is whenever you cast a spell that is one of your granted spells, and so in addition to just what comes from your tradition, but the actual Bloodline granted spells, or a focus spell from your Bloodline, you get to add special rider effects. Sometimes there's a choice, sometimes it's a set effect based on the Bloodline, but some have more than one that you can choose from. And these are really nice little ways to make your spells feel different than other people's spells, even if it's the same spell that they're casting. What's cool about these Bloodlines is that you can really stack them on top of a character concept you're already working with, to fit along with your ancestry, or you can create a contradiction right out of the gate between your ancestry and the Bloodline that you have to just create more interesting characters and, just create plot hooks both for you and your GM to explore in roleplay. So, as most spellcasters in Pathfinder Second Edition, there's really not a whole lot that you get from level up. That's pretty much in the spells that you get and get access to as those increase in power. So we can just jump right in now to Feats and Builds. So sorcerers get the standard array of meta magic that we see with most spellcasters. You're going to get, Reach spell, Widen spell. You'll eventually get Quicken spell. You're also going to have the option to gain a familiar or additional cantrips. These are all pretty standard. Something that we saw with the Bard, you'll also gain the ability to get a spell book that contains a few spells that you can swap out in your repertoire every morning. You're going to get a lot of little damage boost abilities, from Dangerous Sorcery to a spell weapon. Now, the fun thing with Dangerous Sorcery is there are some Bloodlines, elemental off the top of my head, that will give you additional damage for using your Bloodline spells, and then if you... and that is listed as an untyped bonus, which is neat. So, where you get to add the spell's level to the damage, and then with Dangerous Sorcery, it is considered a status bonus, increased damage, but because the other damage bonus is untyped, that means that they do stack, so you could be adding twice the spell's level to your damaging spells, and suddenly, single action magic missiles starts to look pretty good. And then, of course, the spell weapon allows you to get a little extra damage on a melee attack if you do need to do that following up casting a spell. As with most spellcasting classes, there are feats to allow you to pick up more focus spells, these specifically to your Bloodline, although there are ways to branch out and get from there. And then, as well as more focus points and the ability to recover more focus points at once, which is all, again, pretty standard. A lot of great counterspell feats. It's my opinion that spontaneous casters have a little bit of an edge with counterspelling than prepared casters, just because you tend to have a wider net of options ready to go. That could potentially allow you to counterspell. So there's some neat options in there, some that the other classes get, like, Reflect Spell and things like that. One that I believe is exclusive to Sorcerer is Consume Spell, where you can actually recover HP after you counterspell something, which is super fun. Sorcerer also has a lot of feats where you can pick up spells from other traditions, some where you can even incorporate any innate or ancestry spells that you get into your repertoire, which is really nice and allows you a little more uses out of those, because the non-cantrip ones are typically once per day. And by adding them into your repertoire, you can also choose to make them signature spells, which means they may be able to level up and heighten in ways that they couldn't for other people who have them as part of their ancestry. So again, just the way that the Bloodlines can tie into ancestries is super fun. You get some options to share your Bloodline with an ally, so whenever you cast your Bloodline spells, instead of you getting that effect, they can get that effect. Whatever that extra rider is, sometimes it's boost to intimidation checks, or, making you hard to perceive, all sorts of varying things. We're not going to talk specifically about the types of Bloodlines until next section, but we're not going to go in detail because there's dozens of them, and it's just going to be a lot of fun for you to go through and look at those yourself. There's a lot of unique meta magic to split a spell between two targets if it's got an attack roll. You can add dazzle or blind effects to some spells. You can fuse two spells together, getting a little more damage on the one spell, but also splitting the damage types between the two types of spells that you've consumed. You can interweave Dispel into a spell, so you can hit somebody with an attack and then also remove some buff that they've got going. A lot of really interesting and unique, meta magic that the sorcerer gets to really make them feel like they've got some extra power and oomph there. You can damage yourself actually and then draw on the power of your blood, taking a little bit of damage and then using that to basically rewrite how your material, semantic, and verbal components work for your spells. So, you could basically bypass anything besides an actual cost, like a gold value cost. You could bypass all of that. You still have to take the same number of actions, but you lose the manipulate trait and take on the concentrate trait, so you could be potentially like tied up or bound and still use these spells. And that is really cool and really reflective again of the fact that these are spells that you're just drawing out of yourself rather than having to appease a god or manipulate the laws of physics or reality like a wizard might. It's all you, and by pushing yourself and harming yourself, you can get these spells out even without things that other spellcasters require. As always, you have the option to pick up an additional 10th level spell slot, and a lot of the standard things through there. There are some unique, really cool, they call them evolutions, that you can pick up based on your tradition, where you can get some sort of spell-like ability type things that you can use throughout, or just almost like additional spells that aren't part of your repertoire that you can use that are really interesting and fun depending on your build. So a whole lot of great fun options for the sorcerer, a lot of wacky stuff, and a lot of things that make you seem like when you're casting spells it's different from what other people do. So what do I think? Well, I think the sorcerer is an excellent first caster class, while keeping loads of potential for more experienced players to either dive in from the get-go or for your inexperienced players to grow into. I think that the tools that it gives lend itself to very simple and straightforward spell casting, or really jumping into those meta magics and those blood magics and things like that to really hone in on some complex sort of maneuvers within your spell casting. The huge out-of-the-gate versatility, some people criticize and say it's not really long-term versatility because once you've made that decision, you're sort of stuck with it. But there are a lot of tools to go outside of your tradition, of course. But just the fact that out of the gate, you can look at a framework for a spellcasting class, say, I like that, and then determine which tradition you want to go with, either because of the needs of the party or the needs of the character concept that you've invented. And I like that as well because you could potentially play several sorcerers with wholly different spellcasting traditions and wholly different bloodlines and things like that. So if you found that you just really like sorcerer, you can stick with sorcerer and still play a really different character over and over and over again, which is something that hasn't always been true in other editions, but is really felt in this one. Something else that is really felt again is the all the riders that you can apply to your spells and the unique meta magics that you get can really make it feel like when you're casting a spell, even if somebody else in the party can cast that same spell, your spell is just different. It's just a little bit, not necessarily better, because a lot of classes get a lot of cool things when they're casting spells, but it's definitely unique, and it feels like there's something different to the source of your power or your mastery of this ability than what other characters have. Flavor-wise, it's delicious. As I said before, you can pretty much create your own plot hooks, give your GM plenty to grab onto just by choosing that bloodline. And what your relationship is to it. Maybe your character knows why they have these powers, and or they don't know, or they understand it but would like to learn more about it. And then beyond that little wrinkle, you've also got the wrinkle of how do they feel about it? Do they see it as a curse? Like if they're maybe you're playing a good character, but you've got this undead or demonic bloodline, and you've got to deal with that and how that affects you and what that means to you. You've also got the hiccups of, you know, maybe your bloodline comes from some deal that some ancestor made, and you know, how could that play out for your character? So there's all sorts of wrinkles there for RP, and then there's also the fact that you can double down on a concept. You could be a kobold with a draconic bloodline. You could be a Dhampir with an undead bloodline. You could be a tiefling with a demonic bloodline. You could be a gnome or an elf with a fey bloodline. You know, you could be Aasimar with angelic bloodline. Like, there's so many ways that you can really double down and create this really solid character concept and just funnel everything into it and really hit an archetypical sort of character, or combine those, as I said, with things that don't quite work. Maybe you're an Aasimar with a demonic bloodline, you know, and how does that justify itself, and what does that mean? You know, all these great fun things, and so I really like that aspect of the bloodline and the way that it can mold with ancestry and heritages, you know, and of course everything else that you've got going with your character. It really adds a lot, I feel. The generous spell repertoire compared to other editions where you're actually getting a spell known for every spell slot that you can cast is huge, plus the potential to add all sorts more. You really can build a very versatile spellcaster, whereas in other editions the Sorcerer has sort of felt like sometimes a one-trick pony, or at least a one-specialization pony, with anything else that they have just being, you know, really either the most common things that they need, or more things to fit that core concept. But having 40-some spells and potentially, you know, between 9 and 9 and 12 or 13-ish of them potentially being signature spells, you know, and then having potentially several that are coming from other traditions, you can just really cast a wide net, much wider than other editions of the Sorcerer. So it's not nearly as constrictive as it used to be, you know, here in Second Edition, and I really like that a lot. You know, a lot of times Sorcerers might feel like round to round they've got their best spells and they want to use those over and over again, but having this wider repertoire means that you can not be quite as afraid to pick up some utility or some less universally applicable options. Overall, I think the Sorcerer is a lot of fun. It's really great. As I said, great for starting people, but still plenty of room to grow and learn for people who have a lot more they want out of it. And it's just really tough for me, in my opinion, to beat it for just plot hooks. So I'm real positive on the Sorcerer. Hopefully you are too. Definitely down in the comments, let us know. You know, what do you like about the Sorcerer? Are you playing a Sorcerer? What bloodline did you pick? You know, how did you integrate that into your ancestry and heritage if you did? You know, definitely curious to know, so let's know down in the comments. Thank you so much. Welcome to the Collective, and we'll see you next time.